The night air was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint rumble of distant traffic and the soft cry of a little girl. Emily's stomach growled as she held her sister's hand tightly, her small body trembling in the cold. The sisters had been wandering the streets since the morning, searching for something, anything, that resembled food. But every door they knocked on had been closed. Every stranger passed them without even a glance. Emily was only 7 years old, yet her face carried the weight of years of hardship. Her eyes, large and tired, reflected both fear and a stubborn will to survive. Her younger sister, Lily, was just 5. She clung to Emily's torn sleeve, too weak to speak, her lips pale from the biting wind. They hadn't eaten in 2 days. The little bread their stepmother had thrown at them last week had long been gone, and the tiny coins they once collected from passers-by had disappeared as quickly as they came. Hunger was no longer just a dull ache, it had turned into a burning pain, twisting their insides and leaving them desperate. Emily stopped at the corner of a bakery. Through the glass, she could see shelves stacked with golden loaves of bread, still steaming from the oven. The smell drifted into the night air, teasing her. Her knees weakened, and without thinking, she collapsed on the sidewalk. Tears blurred her vision as she pulled her sister closer. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Just a little, we're so hungry." But no one answered. People walked past, quickening their steps, pretending not to notice the 2 fragile figures in the dark. A mother tugged her child away, as if poverty were something contagious. A man lowered his head, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. To them, the girls were invisible. Emily pressed her forehead to the ground. She had no pride left to protect. Her body shook as she raised her voice, louder this time, trembling with desperation. "Please! Someone, please give us something to eat." Her cry echoed through the street, but it was met only with silence. Her sister whimpered beside her, and Emily hugged her tightly, trying to shield her from the world's cruelty. For a moment, Emily thought this was how it would end, shivering on the cold ground, begging for mercy that would never come. But fate, though cruel, had other plans. A car slowed down nearby. It was sleek and black, its headlights cutting through the shadows. Emily didn't look up at first, cars had passed them many times before, none had ever stopped. But this one did. The engine went quiet. A door opened. Heavy footsteps approached. Emily lifted her head, her cheeks wet with tears. A tall man in a dark coat stood in front of her. His presence was commanding, his voice calm but firm. "Why are you on the ground, little one?" he asked. Emily swallowed hard. Her throat felt raw, but she forced the words out. "We're hungry, sir, we have nothing. Please, just a piece of bread." The man studied her. His eyes, sharp, piercing, softened for a moment as he noticed the small child leaning against Emily, barely awake. His chest tightened at the sight. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. For a second, Emily thought he would toss a coin at her, like others had done before. But instead, he crouched down, meeting her gaze. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emily," she stammered. "And this is my sister." "Lily." He nodded slowly. "Emily, stand up." Her legs wobbled as she obeyed, clutching Lily's hand. The man glanced back at his car, then at the bakery door, still glowing with warm light. He seemed to hesitate, as if weighing something heavier than just buying bread. Emily felt her heart race. Was this man different? Or was he just another stranger who would leave them behind once curiosity faded? "Stay here," he said firmly. He walked into the bakery. Moments later, he returned with 2 warm loaves wrapped in paper. The smell nearly made Emily collapse again. He placed one in her arms, the other in Lily's small hands. "Eat," he said simply. Emily tore the bread apart with trembling fingers, handing the larger piece to her sister before taking a bite herself. The warmth filled her mouth, and for the first time in days, she felt alive. Tears streamed down her face, not just from hunger, but from relief. The man watched silently, his expression unreadable. He could have left then. But something about the way Emily protected her sister, even in misery, stirred something deep within him. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. And if you believe no child should suffer like Emily and Lily, show your support by liking this story and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Together, we can give these little voices a chance to be heard. The bread should have been enough, but the man didn't leave. He waited until Emily and Lily slowed their frantic bites, until their shoulders relaxed and their breathing steadied. Then he took off his coat and wrapped it around both of them, pulling the collar up so the wind couldn't creep in. The coat swallowed them like a small shelter. For a moment, the street felt less cruel. "Come," he said, not loud, not demanding, just certain. He gestured toward the corner where a small diner glowed with yellow light. Emily hesitated. The rule she had learned on the streets was simple: trust is expensive when you have nothing. But Lily's lips were turning blue. Emily nodded, and the man opened the door for them. Warmth washed over their faces. The smell of soup and coffee anchored Emily's drifting thoughts back to the room. A waitress glanced up, surprised at the sight of two little girls wrapped in a stranger's coat, then softened when she saw their faces. The man chose a booth in the back, where the noise felt like a protective hum rather than a threat. "2 bowls of chicken soup," he said to the waitress, "and hot chocolate. Extra marshmallows." He looked at Emily. "Unless you prefer something else." Emily shook her head quickly. Lily didn't speak. She clutched the bread like a secret she might lose if she blinked. The man waited until the steaming bowls arrived, then placed a napkin in front of each girl like a ritual, something careful, something normal. "My name is Daniel," he said at last. "And yours we already know. Emily and Lily." Emily kept one hand around her sister's shoulder. "Thank you, Daniel," she whispered, testing the name. It felt safe to say. "You don't owe me thanks," he replied. "You owe yourselves a chance to be warm." He paused. "How long have you been out?" Emily stared at the soup. The truth was a fragile thing. It broke when you held it too tightly. "Since morning," she said, and then, as if a door had quietly clicked open inside her, other pieces tumbled out. "Sometimes longer. Sometimes we sleep in the hallway if the door's locked. Sometimes she throws our things outside and tells us to find them in the morning. The boys on our street kick them into the gutter." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "Who locks the door?" "Our stepmother," Emily said, eyes flicking up. "She says we make the house dirty. She says we cost too much." Her throat closed for a second. "After Dad left, she said the house wasn't for us anymore." "Left?" Daniel repeated softly. Emily swallowed. "He went to work one day and didn't come back. We heard later, an accident. No one told us at first. We kept waiting by the window. Lily still does sometimes." She smoothed her sister's hair. "The stepmother cried for a week. Then she stopped crying and started shouting." Daniel's hands folded on the table. No big gestures, no pitying gasps, just listening, the way a careful doctor listens to a heartbeat that's been ignored for too long. "Do you have any other family?" Emily shook her head. "Dad used to say his sister lived far away, but we never met her. And Mom," she glanced at Lily, then away. "I don't remember her enough to tell you what her voice sounded like." The waitress returned with the hot chocolate, setting each cup down as if it were something sacred. Lily's eyes widened at the floating marshmallows. She touched one with a finger and smiled for the first time that night, small, quick, like a flicker in a dark room. "Careful," Daniel murmured. "Blow on it first." He demonstrated, patient, and Lily mirrored him, cheeks puffed. Emily watched them both, a knot loosening in her chest she hadn't realized was there. They ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that heals. When the bowls were empty and the chocolate had left soft mustaches on 2 tiny faces, Daniel wiped his mouth and reached into his coat pocket, producing a simple leather wallet and a thin black card. He didn't place the card on the table yet. He looked at Emily instead. "You are responsible," he said. I watched how you gave your sister the bigger piece of bread. I watched how you kept your eyes on the door, counting time and people. That's what being responsible looks like, even if the world has made you practice it too early. Emily didn't know what to say. The words settled over her like another layer of warmth, one that didn't blow away with the wind. I can make a phone call, Daniel continued. There are shelters that are safe, run by good people. There are social workers who will listen. But shelters can be loud and frightening. And sometimes systems move slowly, even when hunger doesn't. He glanced at the window. Outside, the night had thinned a little, less a solid block of cold, more a veil you could almost see through. I can also take you somewhere quiet for tonight, he said. A guest room. A warm bed. Breakfast in the morning. No one will shout. No one will lock the door behind you. And tomorrow, we will talk to the right people, properly, so this isn't just a kind gesture that fades when the sun rises. Emily's fingers tightened on her spoon. The rules of the street screamed at her again, nothing free is ever free, nothing kind is permanent. But Daniel's eyes, steady, unhurried, didn't look like the eyes of someone collecting debts. They looked like someone measuring responsibility and deciding he could carry it. What if she gets angry? Emily asked. If we aren't there when she wakes up? Daniel considered that for a moment, as though weighing contexts she couldn't see. Anger is not authority, he said quietly. And cruelty is not guardianship. If someone is hurting you or abandoning you, you are not required to be present for it. The law says so. And so does anything that remembers what a child is. He finally set the black card on the table. A name in small silver letters. No company logo, no glitter, just a phone number and an address. Emily didn't understand what it meant, but the waitress did. She glanced at the card and then at Daniel with a tiny nod that said, I know who you are. Do you trust me? Daniel asked, the question direct but not urgent. Emily looked at Lily, who was fighting sleep with a stubbornness that mirrored her sister's. She thought of the hallway, the locked door, the boys on the street, the bakery window that reflected two small ghosts instead of two children. Trust was not something you gave all at once. Maybe you gave it in pieces, like bread torn carefully down the middle. For tonight, Emily said. I trust you for tonight. Daniel smiled, not wide, not triumphant, just relieved. For tonight is enough. He stood and spoke to the waitress, who packed 2 sandwiches and an apple into a paper bag without being asked, adding a small cookie at the last second as if it were a secret between them. Outside, the car waited. A driver stepped out to open the door, his eyes kind, his movements slow so the girls wouldn't flinch. Emily guided Lily into the back seat, then paused with one foot on the curb. She looked up at the sky, expecting no answer and asking anyway. Please. The leather seat was soft and warmer than the diner. The door closed with a gentle thud that felt like a promise. The city slid by in smudged streaks of light. Lily's head found Emily's shoulder and settled there. Daniel spoke quietly into his phone, words Emily only half caught, names, an address, instructions to prepare a room, to have a pediatrician on call just to check them over. The car turned down a tree-lined street where the houses were taller and the lamps were softer. Emily's heartbeat stumbled. Wealth was a landscape she didn't know how to walk across. The car stopped before a building that didn't shout about itself, no gold gates, no statues, just a door that looked heavy and a patch of winter flowers stubbornly blooming despite the season. Inside, the floor didn't creak. A woman with silver hair appeared, wrapping a sweater more tightly around her shoulders. Mr. Hale, she said to Daniel with fond reproach, you bring home strays with bigger eyes every year. Best habit I have, Daniel answered. This is Emily. This is Lily. They're our guests. The woman's face softened. I'm Mara. Come, let's get you warm. Baths first. Then bed. We can talk in the morning when your stomachs aren't louder than your thoughts. Emily wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at that. She chose neither. She followed Mara down a hall that smelled like clean linen and soap. In the bathroom, steam fogged the mirror. The bath water ran, and Lily's face, grim with fatigue, melted into something like wonder at the sight of bubbles. Emily washed her sister's hair the way she remembered her father doing it, slowly, careful not to get soap in her eyes. She didn't notice when Mara slipped away and returned with 2 small nightgowns that somehow fit as if they'd been waiting for them. There were pajamas for Emily too, folded neatly at the edge of the counter. Later, in a guest room with a quilt pattern like a patch of sunlight, Emily tucked Lily under the covers and stood there a moment, listening. The quiet here was different. It wasn't the suspicious quiet of an empty hallway, waiting for a key to turn. It was the honest quiet of a place that didn't intend harm. A soft knock. Daniel stood at the door, not crossing the threshold. "There's a small light by the bed," he said. "If you wake up and the dark feels too big." Emily nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. He hesitated, then added, "Tomorrow, we'll make calls. We'll do this the right way. You won't have to go back to a locked door." Emily looked at Lily sleeping, at the curve of her sister's hand curled against her cheek. She felt the word building in her chest, the one she hadn't been able to say without fear twisting it into something else. "Promise?" she asked. Daniel met her eyes. "Promise," he said, steady as a lighthouse. When he left, Emily turned off the lamp and climbed into bed. The sheets were crisp. The pillow held her like a story she might finally belong to. She lay awake for a long time, listening to Lily breathe, counting the seconds between her sisters and Hale's, as if to prove the night wouldn't take anything else from them. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked, patient, measured. Emily didn't know yet who Daniel really was, or why his card made grown-ups nod, or how a stranger could turn a street into a home in the space of an hour. She only knew this: the hunger had quieted. The door was unlocked. And morning, for the first time in forever, did not look like an enemy. Morning arrived like a gentle stranger, slipping through the curtains in ribbons of pale gold. Emily woke before her sister, her eyes snapping open with the old reflex that life on the streets had carved into her bones. For a moment she forgot where she was. Her hand reached out, searching for the cold pavement, the draft of a hallway, the echo of footsteps that never meant safety. But instead she found warmth, a quilt pulled high, a pillow that still smelled of lavender, and Lily breathing steadily beside her. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a dream. It was real. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her sister, and padded to the doorway. The air smelled like fresh bread again, not the tormenting scent from the bakery window, but something homely and kind. She followed it down a wide staircase until she found Mara in the kitchen, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been doing this for years. A kettle whistled softly, and sunlight painted the counter in warm patches. "Good morning, child," Mara said, not startled at all to see her. "Hungry again?" Emily hesitated. Admitting hunger always carried shame, but Mara's tone held no judgment. "Only care." She nodded. "Then sit," Mara instructed gently. "Breakfast is almost ready." On the table sat bowls of oatmeal topped with berries, 2 glasses of milk, and slices of toast with butter melting in the center. It looked like a feast to Emily. She pulled out a chair, her legs dangling above the floor, and stared at the spread as if it might disappear. "Where's Daniel?" she asked quietly. "In his study. He has calls this morning," Mara replied, pouring tea into a mug. "But he told me to make sure you and your sister eat as much as you want." Emily looked down at her hands, still unsure of what was allowed. "Why is he helping us? He doesn't even know us." Mara paused, her eyes softening. She sat across from Emily. "Daniel sees things others choose to ignore. He doesn't talk about it much, but I've known him long enough to understand. He lost someone once, someone young. Since then, he can't turn away from children in pain." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to ask more, but just then Lily padded into the room, hair tousled, eyes heavy with sleep. Mara smiled and guided her into the chair beside Emily. "Eat, little one," Mara said warmly. "Your sister saved you a spot." Lily reached for the toast with small hands, and Emily couldn't stop herself from laughing softly, a sound she hadn't made in months. Later that morning, Daniel appeared in the doorway. His presence filled the room without effort. He wore a crisp shirt, but his sleeves were rolled to the elbows, as if he had been working already. In one hand he held a folder thick with papers, in the other, a phone that he slipped into his pocket when he saw them. "Good," he said simply, seeing the empty bowls. "You ate?" Emily wiped her mouth quickly, nervous again. "Yes, sir." "Thank you." Daniel studied her for a moment, then pulled out the chair at the head of the table. "Emily, I need to ask you some questions. Not because I want to pry, but because the truth matters if we're going to protect you." The word protect made her stomach twist. No adult had ever said that to her before. She nodded slowly. "Your stepmother," Daniel began carefully. "Does she hurt you physically, or only lock you out?" Emily's fingers tightened around her napkin. "She yells. She throws things sometimes. Once she pushed Lily into the hallway and slammed the door. Lily cried all night. I tried to keep her warm." Daniel's jaw tightened, though his voice remained calm. "That's enough. It's more than enough." He opened the folder and slid a paper across the table. It was a document with official seals, too complicated for Emily to read fully, but she recognized her father's name printed at the top. "I had someone pull records this morning," Daniel explained. "Your father left behind more than you know. There's an account in his name, savings. It was supposed to be for you and your sister. Your stepmother has been trying to keep it hidden." Emily's eyes widened. "Money? For us?" "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "Not riches, but enough to give you food, clothes, school, safety. Legally, it belongs to you. But she never told you, did she?" Emily shook her head fiercely. The betrayal felt like another door slamming in her heart. "People like her," Daniel continued, "think children won't discover the truth. But the truth has a way of finding daylight." That afternoon, Daniel took them for a drive. The city looked different from the back seat of his car, less cruel, though still unfamiliar. He pointed out the courthouse as they passed, the children's center, the school where he said Lily might start once everything was resolved. His voice was steady, filling in the cracks of silence with possibilities Emily hadn't dared imagine. They stopped at a park. Children laughed on swings, their voices bright. Emily and Lily stood frozen, unsure if they were allowed to join. Daniel crouched down beside them. "Go," he said simply. "Play. I'll be right here." Lily ran first, laughter spilling out of her like a secret she had been guarding. Emily followed more slowly, her shoes crunching on the gravel. She sat on a swing and pushed herself gently, the motion awkward but freeing. For a moment she forgot the hallway, the bakery window, the nights of hunger. She glanced back at Daniel, who sat on a bench with his phone, but his eyes never left them. The quiet man with the sharp gaze, watching, protecting. When the sun dipped lower, painting the park in shades of orange, Emily returned to the bench. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and her heart beat fast from running. "Daniel," she asked softly, "what happens now? Will we go back?" He shook his head slowly. "No, Emily. You won't go back. There are things moving already, papers being filed, names being recorded. Your stepmother will have to answer for what she's done. You and Lily will be safe." Emily wanted to believe him, but the fear still lingered like a shadow. Safety was a word she had never owned. Could it really belong to her now? Daniel seemed to read the doubt in her eyes. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You've carried the weight of secrets too long, Emily. Let me carry them now. It's not your burden anymore." She looked up at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe. The call came just after noon. Mara placed the handset on the counter, her expression turning from calm to careful. "They've located your stepmother," she told Daniel quietly. "She's at the apartment. And she's making noise." Emily heard the words from the doorway and felt her stomach fold in on itself. Noise. She knew what that word meant when it wore her stepmother's face. Doors slamming. Shoes thrown. Names sharpened into knives. Daniel closed the folder he'd been reviewing. "All right," he said. "We'll do this properly." He looked at Emily, not around her. "A social worker will meet us there. And an officer. You won't be alone for 1 second. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, though her hands had begun to shake. Lily reached for her, as she always did, and Emily steadied both of them at once, a habit built so deep it felt like breathing. The car ride was quiet. The city's noise pushed in at the windows, but inside the cabin everything was contained, measured. Daniel spoke softly on his phone, confirming names, times, case numbers. He said guardian ad litem and temporary protective order, words Emily didn't know but began to trust the way sailors trust certain stars. They turned onto the block that had always felt like a dare. The building's bricks looked the same, tired, unwashed, and the iron stair rail still bit at the palm if you held it wrong. Emily's throat closed. She remembered nights tracing the cracks in the hallway ceiling, convincing herself they were constellations. A woman in a navy blazer waited on the sidewalk, a laminated badge clipped to her pocket. She knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "I'm Ms. Rivera," she said, voice steady. "I'm here for you both. We'll go up together. If anything feels too loud, you tell me and we step out. You control the pace. All right?" Emily nodded again. Daniel's presence at her back was a wall she could lean on without falling through. They climbed. The hallway smelled the same, stale detergent and something sweet rotting behind a door that never opened. Emily's feet slowed at the gouge in the paint where the lock had once snapped. Ms. Rivera noticed. "It's different today," she said gently. "Because you're different today. You're not alone." The apartment door was ajar. Voices poured through, furious, brittle, the sound of someone building a tower from excuses and watching it sway. A uniformed officer stood to one side, arms folded, gaze neutral in the practiced way of people who cannot afford to be pulled under by every storm. Ms. Rivera knocked even though the door gaped. "Good afternoon," she called. "We're entering." The living room hadn't changed, except that it was somehow smaller than Emily remembered. The couch sagged deeper, the plant in the corner had become a skeleton of itself, and the rug bore a dark stain that no one had persuaded into forgetting. The woman who had fed their hunger to the hallway stood with her back to the window, chest heaving. "Where have you been?" the stepmother hissed when she saw the girls. The sound carried something like relief, but it twisted into accusation before it could land. "Running around with strangers? Do you know what trouble you've caused me?" Ms. Rivera stepped forward, body a shield without looking like one. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to direct your comments to me," she said. "You've been informed of the temporary order filed this morning." The stepmother's eyes slid to Daniel, calculation flashing there. "And who are you?" she demanded. "The philanthropist?" The word came out like an insult. "Playing hero for the cameras we don't see?" Daniel didn't blink. "I'm someone who doesn't leave children on a landing in winter," he said. "No heat." Just the sentence placed on the table like a stone that would not move. The officer handed the stepmother a paper. "You've been notified of a hearing tomorrow," he said. "Today is document retrieval and welfare check. Keep your hands where I can see them, please." The room tipped toward quiet. Emily felt the world narrow to the sound of the wall clock ticking above the television. She reached for Lily's hand, and Lily squeezed back, pulse fluttering like a bird. Ms. Rivera set a folder on the coffee table and opened it. "We have records indicating funds in Mr. Carter's name, Emily and Lily's father, designated for their care," she said. "Bank correspondence shows repeated attempts to contact the guardian on file over the last year. We also have statements from neighbors regarding the children's frequent presence in the hallway overnight." The stepmother's mouth twitched. "We were fumigating," she said quickly. "It wasn't safe inside." "Every week?" Ms. Rivera asked, perfectly even. Pests, the stepmother snapped. It's an old building. Children aren't pests, Daniel said. The sentence hung in the air, refused to go anywhere else. Something in the stepmother's face hardened, turned to tile. You expect gratitude, she said to no one and everyone. I kept a roof over their heads after he left me here with bills you couldn't imagine. After he died, Emily said, and her own voice startled her. It sounded like it belonged to someone older. He didn't leave you. The stepmother's eyes flicked to her with something like fear bending under anger. Don't you take that tone? The tone belongs to me, Emily said, quieter now. She hadn't planned to speak. The words had been waiting. So does the money Dad saved for us. You knew. You didn't tell us. A small sound escaped Lily, not a cry, not quite. Emily shifted to put her between herself and the storm. Ms. Rivera slid another document forward. We'll be taking the children's clothes, birth certificates, any school records, she said. We have a checklist here for items that belong to them. You don't need to assist, you just need not to impede. The stepmother's gaze skittered to a drawer near the kitchen, then away. It was a look that told on itself. Daniel noticed. The officer noticed. Ms. Rivera noticed and walked to the drawer, opening it carefully. Inside lay an envelope, thick with papers and an elastic band desperate to hold it all together. Ms. Rivera lifted it out and thumbed through, bank statements, letters, a small photograph of two girls in winter coats too thin for the season. She paused at the photo, then held it up to the light. This belongs to them, she said. The stepmother lunged a half step, then stopped when the officer cleared his throat. Fury hit the walls and bounced back, weaker with every rebound. Why? The stepmother demanded suddenly, turning on Daniel as if he were the only object that could bear blame without breaking. Why do you care? There are hundreds like them. Why these? Daniel let the question arrive. He didn't push it away with platitudes. Because a long time ago, he said, someone I loved needed help and didn't get it in time. I consider generosity a debt I still owe. Silence. The clock ticked. Somewhere down the hall a neighbor laughed at a television show, the sound drifting in indecently cheerful. Ms. Rivera knelt in front of the girls. I want you to choose some things, she said. Not because things fix everything, but because what we carry matters. A book. A sweater. The photograph if you want it. Emily looked around the room that had refused to be a home. Her gaze caught on a stuffed rabbit with a button eye leaning against the heater. Lily saw it too and stepped forward, hesitation giving way to longing. Emily nodded. Take him, she whispered, and Lily hugged the rabbit as if apologizing for leaving it behind for so long. They gathered a small pile, the rabbit, a book with a rip across the cover, a hair ribbon faded by too much sun, the photograph. Ms. Rivera recorded each item, her movements quiet, precise. There was respect even in the way she applied tape to the box. The stepmother had run out of words. She stood with her arms wrapped tight around herself, as if fending off a cold that came from the inside. For a flicker of a second, Emily saw the outline of a person who might have been kind if life had not welded anger to every hinge. The thought didn't excuse what had been done. It just refused to flatten it. We're going now, Ms. Rivera said. You'll receive information about the hearing. The stepmother's chin lifted, but her eyes slid away. No apology came. Emily did not ask for one. They stepped back into the hallway. The air felt wider. Daniel exhaled, the first full breath since they'd arrived. He touched his phone, then hesitated. One more thing, he said to Ms. Rivera. A pediatrician is waiting at my home. I'd like them seen today. Already arranged, Ms. Rivera said. You move quickly, Mr. Hale. Not quickly enough, he answered, and there was the ache behind his steadiness for only a heartbeat before he set it down again. On the stairs, Lily's foot slipped on a worn edge. Daniel reached out, palm open, not grabbing, offering. Emily watched Lily take it. She watched the way his hand didn't close too tight. Trust, Given in pieces, accepted in pieces. At the building's front door, the winter light had softened to the color of warm aluminum. Traffic muttered. A woman pushed a stroller past and smiled at the girls because today they looked like children rather than shadows. In the car, Daniel didn't speak right away. He waited until the city began to unwind. "You were brave," he said at last. "Brave is not loud. It's steady." Emily held the photograph in her lap. In it, she and Lily stood in front of the same building, smaller, hands clasped, unaware of the corners they'd be pressed into. She slid the picture into the pocket of her coat, the safe one with the good lining. "Is it over?" she asked. "Almost," Daniel said. "There's a room tomorrow where truth is required to speak, even when it's quiet. We'll be there together." Emily looked out the window as the streets changed, narrow to wide, cracked to clean, the kind of map children should learn by walking hand in hand rather than memorizing from distance. On the seat beside her, Lily fell asleep with the rabbit beneath her arm, the button eyes staring at the roof as if it, too, were finally allowed to rest. The car turned toward a home that had begun to learn their names. Behind them, the door that had kept their hunger company stood open for once, letting out a draft that smelled like endings. Ahead, another door waited, one that did not know the word lock the way a weapon knows its weight. For the first time, the future didn't look like a hallway. It looked like a room with lamps lit and people who stayed. The courthouse didn't look like the kind of place where good things happen. It was gray and stern and full of echoes that made small voices sound even smaller. But when Emily stepped through the metal detector with Lily's hand nested inside her own, she noticed something the building couldn't hide: morning light, spilling through a high window and laying a bright square on the polished floor, like a quiet promise. Ms. Rivera met them at the entrance, clipboard in hand, calm as tide. "Right on time," she said, offering Lily a sticker shaped like a star. "Remember what we talked about, Emily? You don't have to say everything. You only have to say the truth you can hold without hurting yourself. I'll carry the rest." Daniel appeared behind them, the knot of his tie slightly crooked in a way that made him look more human than important. "The guardian ad litem will speak first," he said softly. "Then the judge may ask you a question or two. I'll be there the whole time." "Will she be there?" Lily whispered, thumb grazing the frayed ear of the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. "Yes," Ms. Rivera answered honestly. "But she sits where the rules are. And today the rules are good." They were called into a room that tried to be less frightening than a courtroom: wood paneling, a round table, a judge whose glasses sat low on his nose and whose eyes looked like windows you could actually open. Emily slid into a chair between Ms. Rivera and Daniel. Across the table, the stepmother sat rigid, her mouth pressed into a line that wanted to be a wall. The guardian ad litem spoke first, the way Ms. Rivera had promised. She didn't talk about statistics or systems. She spoke about two girls who shared bread with each other when there wasn't enough, girls who slept in a hallway and still woke each other for school on the mornings they could find bus fare. She spoke about a lock that turned against children and a bank account with their father's name on it that had been treated like a secret. Then Ms. Rivera laid the documents down one by one, like stones in a river to help feet cross: the neighbor statements, the police welfare checks, the bank letters. "Neglect is not a misunderstanding," she said. "It is a choice repeated." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The judge looked at Emily last. "Do you want to say something, young lady?" he asked, and his voice did a strange thing: it shrank the room to a size that fit her courage. Emily didn't stand. She only scooted her chair closer to the table and placed both hands on its edge to make them stop shaking. "We were hungry," she said, not loud, not dramatic, just exactly the size of the truth. "I tried to make Lily warm with my coat, but sometimes the hallway took the warmth away." And Emily's eyes flicked to the stepmother and then back to the judge. She didn't stop it. Sometimes she made it happen. The judge nodded once, as if a puzzle piece had clicked exactly where it belonged. "Thank you, Emily," he said, and somehow the words sounded like a medal rather than a dismissal. He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Hale, I have your petition for temporary placement while a permanent plan is established, along with your pledge to fund a trust built from the father's account and your own contribution. The judge pushed his glasses up. You understand this isn't charity. It's responsibility backed by oversight. I insist on oversight, Daniel replied. And I'm not a suitable solution because I have money. I'm a suitable solution because I have time and a house that opens, and because I know precisely what not having those things does to a child. Something uncoiled in the judge's expression, respect, maybe, or shared recognition of old pain. Very well, he said. The stepmother's chair creaked as she shifted, the sound small and desperate. They cost too much, she muttered, words finally breaking from the dam. Everything costs. He promised me, your father promised. She stopped when she realized the room would not bend around her story. The judge's voice did not turn cruel. That would have been too easy, and he seemed like a man who disliked easy. Ma'am, he said, the measure of a house is not how much it costs to keep children, but how much it costs them to live there. He signed his name with deliberate strokes. Temporary custody to Mr. Hale, pending review. Release of funds to the trust controlled by the court-appointed fiduciary. Supervised visitation to be determined after a parental fitness assessment. We reconvene in 30 days. The gavel touched wood like a polite knock. It didn't thunder. It didn't need to. Truth had learned the girls' names and spoken them out loud. Outside, the air felt brand new. Not a different city, but a city that finally showed them its warm side. Ms. Rivera kneeled to adjust Lily's scarf and looked up at Emily with eyes that smiled more than her mouth. Text me if the night gets loud, she said, tapping a number into Daniel's phone. Sometimes victory makes old shadows panic. Will you still come? Lily asked, as if good people vanish when papers are signed. Oh, yes, Ms. Rivera said. Good doesn't quit. They walked toward the car, not in a hurry for the first time. Emily glanced at Daniel. Does this mean we live with you now? The question tasted like hope and fright at once. For now, Daniel said, honest again. And for as long as the court believes it best. But there's something else. He handed Emily a slim blue notebook and a pen that clicked like a tiny camera shutter. This is yours. Not a diary, unless you want it to be. I call mine a ledger of grace. I write down the names of moments I don't want to forget. Not because they were perfect, but because they were proof. Proof of what? Emily asked. That light happens, he said. Even in rooms with no windows. Back at the house, Mara had made pancakes shaped like clumsy hearts. The pediatrician with the kind face checked Lily's weight and listened to her lungs, then nodded as if a puzzle had agreed to be solved. Food and sleep in time, he said. And a little joy, prescribed twice daily. They ate at the big table that had felt too fancy yesterday and felt exactly right today. Lily's laughter came easier, the rabbit propped beside her as if also hungry for syrup. After lunch, Daniel took Emily to a small office lined with books whose spines looked tired in the best way. There's one more answer I owe you, he said, gesturing toward a framed photograph on the shelf. It showed a girl of about 9, hair in crooked braids, grin lopsided, eyes familiar in their stubborn warmth. She was my sister, Daniel said. Her name was Anna. She died when I was young, and no one saw the warning signs when it could have mattered. I always thought, if someone had looked a second longer, listened a second more, he let the sentence end where it needed to. So now I look. Now I listen. Emily studied the photograph. She didn't say she was sorry. She said, you would have liked our dad. It felt right to place the sentence here, in a room where names were kept safely. Daniel smiled, a real one that pulled at the corners of his tiredness. I think I would have. Evening slid in wearing a lighter coat than before. Emily and Lily built a crooked fort from blankets and 2 chairs. Mara pretended not to notice their theft of furniture while actually rearranging lamps to give the fort better light. Daniel sat on the floor outside with a stack of mail, answering what the day had left unsaid. Emily? Lily's whisper floated from the cave of blankets. Yes? Does our house have a hallway? Emily thought for a second, hand on the blue notebook, pen uncapped. It has one, she said. But it doesn't lead to a door that locks. It leads to a kitchen that smells like pancakes. Lily giggled and drifted into sleep, the rabbit's button eye peeking out like a watchful moon. When the house finally quieted, Emily opened the notebook and wrote the first line in careful letters. Today the judge knew our names. She paused, then added another. Today the door opened the right way. She closed the cover and held it to her chest, a book that might one day be full. Down the hall, Daniel turned off the last lamp, leaving one on near the girl's room, the small light by the bed he'd promised. He stood there a moment, listening to the soft rhythm of two children breathing, the sound like tide against sand. It didn't heal what came before. It did something else that mattered just as much, it offered tomorrow a place to land. Outside, the city breathed with them, same streets, different map. The bakery window would steam again in the morning, only next time Emily would walk in through the door, not kneel on the pavement. Not beg, but buy. Not swallowed by the cold, but wrapped in the ordinary miracle of enough. And somewhere, in a file that would not be allowed to gather dust, a trust with two little names waited to grow alongside them. Not charity. Not luck. Something earned by surviving, and protected by people who had decided the word guardian should mean exactly what it says. If this story moved you, no child should learn the shape of hunger or the sound of a locked door. If Emily and Lily's journey touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Cryspire, and share it with someone who needs a little light today. Your support helps us keep telling stories that turn shadows into open doors.